Some of the work is brand new and reflects the pandemic, I think. Other pieces, they were selected by both Marka Burns and Helen Cox. So I know Marka was really interested in the work that is more of a large color palette, whereas I usually work largely in black and white, and maybe occasionally gray sneaks in there, but I feel like the times that we're living through, black and white, the time we're living through is so dire, and I feel like color in a way dilutes the message. So I prefer to work in monochromatic tones. Well, I've lived almost 70 years, so I guess the message has a lot to do with decay. It has a lot to do with what I've seen throughout that time period. Some of the pieces are literary. Some of the pieces reference other works. So the piece that's there, it's actually a wood engraving. So I'm the only printmaker in the exhibition, but some of these people have worked with me and learned printmaking from me. Printmaking is a odd thing because it's like a remote sensing. So you don't, you do the drawing, and I usually draw on my blocks directly. In fact, there's a block here that can show people how the blocks are carved. And you don't actually know what will be there until the piece is inked and it goes through the press. So it's this sort of magical alchemy. But to get back to that small wood engraving, I mean small for me, it has a little drawing in it, and the drawing is on an envelope, and in the envelope is a seed of a plant. So it talks about how this seed, it's from an Australian plant, can be buried for 30 to 50 years and then replanted, and it will still sprout. The title of the print is The Pallid Seeds of Ghania aspera, and it's actually named after a section in a book by Salman Rushdie. So a lot of the references are literary. The reference there was also botanical, and it also references Sandro Botticelli, because I was thinking of the birth of Venus when I constructed it. So when you look at it, you would never notice that, and then finally it's like, oh, well, yes, I see where she's going with that. So that one also has screen printing and watercolor, and as I said before, graphite drawing. So the newest one is that large one, and it's called Proteus. So it's named after this figure from mythology who could take on different forms. And I say that it's really a pandemic print, also because of the way that it was made. Normally I work with a large press at the university, and I had to print the whole thing by hand at home. So, and I didn't have a lot of material when I was making it. This was when we were in the most dire part of the lockdown. So I started to think, I'll use what I have at hand. And what I had at hand were coffee filters. So all of what we call chine-collé, which means Chinese paste, so it's a lighter weight of paper, washi, which is a Japanese word for what most people call rice paper. That was dyed by the coffee. I would leave it above and beyond so that the brown came through. And then I did a technique called frottage, which is rubbing. So I rubbed the bottom of, this is going to sound so quotidian, but the bottom of a bowl had this plastic on it to keep it from slipping, and it was a wonderful pattern. So when you see it, you'll see all of those patterns underneath. And then the print itself, I just started collaging things into it. So I used to be really obsessive about making additions. And in addition, each print has to match up with what's called the BAT, the bon à trier, which means good to pull, because if you're working with a printer. And as I've gotten older, that doesn't matter to me so much anymore. So in a way, they're kind of mono prints, although this one is very much like the one that's now in the Newport Beach Library. So I'm having a solo show there in conjunction or alongside of this exhibition. So there's more work up in that exhibition, and that will be up through March. So they're mainly relief prints, all of them. And I think the block will help people understand how the print kind of comes together. So I always feel like I'm conducting the Supremes, and Diana Ross is my woodblock, right? And then Florence and Mary are, lithography or screen printing or drawing or something else coming in on the side to support. Yeah, I've been teaching there since 1989, so that's 33 years. So that's probably older than the other people that are in the show. I thought that was kind of interesting. And some of them, as I said, have been my students. So I feel like that's really wonderful to see them sort of making such successes out of themselves, yeah? And then I wish there were other prints in these pieces, but I see there are some drawings down there. So I also taught drawing, and I also teach the history of printmaking and drawing, which is kind of nice. It gives me a chance to exercise my art historical chops. So actually, my high school teacher, Herbert Goldstein at Flushing High School in Queens, was so profoundly influential for me. And then I studied with Mauricio Lazansky at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. He's a very famous printmaker from Argentina. Did this series called The Nazi Drawings, incredibly powerful work. And then I went on to grad school and studied with another artist from Argentina, Antonio Fresconi, at the State University of New York at Purchase, where I taught for a while before coming here. But I have worked around the world. So I've done, as I mentioned, I did a residency in Germany in a little place called Daimlerstadt-Roden. And I did this residency, it's called the Beisinghof residency. So it was fabulous. I had my own house and a studio, and it was beautiful. And I did another residency for a month in Iceland in a place called Seyðisfjörður, which is all the way the East Fjords. And that was fabulous. It was an international residency, so I was one of the people from this country, but there was a fellow from Hong Kong, there were other Scandinavians there, and it was just wonderful. And then I did, trying to think of all these residencies, a residency in Dublin, which was probably my favorite, was to work in the Temple Bar area at a space it's called Black Church Print Studio. And it's right across from the famous Temple Bar in Temple Bar. So I had rented a place to live there, and I was there in the summer. And then on sabbaticals, I've worked in museums throughout this country. And so I would really recommend people, once they attain a certain level of expertise or what have you, to try to get a residency somewhere, but not one that you have to pay for. That would be beware of those. Well, because the work is so labor intensive, it takes me a really long time to cut a block. Usually I'll go with the drawing already on the block, and then I will cut it wherever I am, and then proceed to use what comes to hand where I am. So when I was in Iceland, I worked in Dieter Roth's studio, and he had a very small press. And so I couldn't print my large block there. I had to bring this huge suitcase. And so I ended up printing it by hand. And then when I was in Germany, I was using whatever paper I could find. It's this very small town, so I started to collage different elements in and things like that. So, but sometimes, when I'm there, the notion of cold, when I was in Iceland, I lived in Iowa for 14 years. Cold in Iceland is a whole different cold. And so I was able to start thinking about how can I incorporate that in a future work. And I actually started working in figuration when I worked in Iowa all those years ago. So my work looked like Edward Hopper's work, which is bizarre when I look at what I do now. Well, it has such a long history. So when I'm doing, especially relief printmaking, it goes back to the 1400s. So when I'm creating something, I feel like I'm in touch with my ancestors in a way. And that sounds so corny, right? But it's very real. And then, as I said before, it's this kind of remote sensing that you have to, it's like, swimming against a current. And the reason I like wood is because it's a collaborative effort. So I'm not working with something inert that, I can totally have dominion over. I'm working with something that was once living and that has quirks. You know, every once in a while you'll be cutting along and something will, in the wood, will cause your tool to tweak, for lack of a better word. So I think, and then the look of it, and I'm obsessive compulsive. So it's the perfect thing for somebody that's OCD to work with. So I feel, I don't know. I mean, I feel like in a way we printmakers, we are the Rodney Dangerfields of the art world, that no one understands what we do, and it's becoming more and more dire in terms of things that are essentially posters being marketed as prints. And God knows, any new technology, I'm so excited. And sometimes I will work with the computer and I'll take an initial drawing and I'll scan it and tweak it. And I do have a digital projector at home, so I'll work on a small drawing and then I'll project it onto the block. But there's that excitement that happens when you alter something. We have these printers at school now, they're laser cutters, right? And would I ever use one? I don't think so, because so much of what I do is a decision when I'm carving. But it is tempting. So normally I show everywhere else, but I don't really show that much locally. So I guess that's another reason I'm excited about being able to have a show where my students can get to it and see it.